When you get married, you realize that things aren't that different after all. I still need to make myself happy. You know what? I know everyone says that, but it's really something else when you experience it for yourself. That kind of pain is something you don't really understand until you've been through it after making a promise to someone and it not working out. Oscar in 1991. Cindy Crawford moved with Richard Gere in a red Versace dress that went down low on her hips. An image that changed the fashion world and became a Hollywood icon for love, success, and beauty in one picture. It wasn't just two stars, they were like a dream come true. The most beautiful supermodel in the world and the most ruggedly charming character in movies. Then that dream fell apart. Not in a scandalous way or with loud charges, just a quiet admission. I'm not sure if we were ever friends after almost 30 years. People always thought that line was perfect, but it cuts through it like a slow, thin blade. When the world's most beautiful woman and Hollywood's most interesting man fall in love but can't stay together. Does love ever really have a chance? People all over the world used to love this love story, and this video will take you back to it and show you what was never told. A 22-year-old woman lost herself in the focus of the man she loved. There was a wedding with a tin ring and the breakup was so bad that no one dared call it a failure. But everyone knew it was a loss. Cindy Crawford had just turned 21 years old in 1988. She was becoming known in the fashion world. A model who is beautiful and healthy, has legs that never end, and has a mole on her lip that makes her stand out. It's not yet a sign, but it's full of possibilities. Cindy was as excited as a young woman who had never imagined being a part of a group of famous people when she showed up to photographer Herb Ritz's dinner that day. Then she met Richard Gere in the bright air of Hollywood. At the time, Richard Gere was 38 years old and a real A-list star, known for his rough charm in American Gigolo, and his love depth in An Officer and a Gentleman. And on the verge of the part that would make or break his career in Pretty Woman. A man wise and aware of who he was in the world. At the same time, Cindy, who was almost 20 years younger than him, was just starting to become famous. The way they met was like two bright orbits colliding, crossing the sky. Plus, Cindy later said she quickly got caught up in it. They started dating and started showing up at all the big events together. They were on the covers of magazines and became the most wanted couple of the 10 years. However, Cindy hadn't yet learned how to name the hole behind the sparkle. She changed little by little to fit in with Richard's world. She did it not because he told her to, but because she thought it was proper for a young woman to do when she loved an older man. Because Richard was so interested in Tibetan Buddhism, she started to learn more about it. She joined groups of people she didn't know, like producers, directors, and film artists, where fashion wasn't the main topic of conversation. She slowly pulled away from the world that had helped her rise. It was a time when Cindy Crawford learned how to bend herself for the person she loved. You like baseball? Then I like baseball too, she said in the documentary, The Supermodels. I'll give it a try. When she was 22, she was ready to change into the person the man next to her wanted her to be. Maybe that made her feel like she was loving in the right way, but it was also the start of a deeper loss of self. While Richard stayed calm, grounded, and the focus of every conversation, Cindy slowly turned into his shadow. When she thought back on it decades later, she said, "I don't know if we were ever friends." It was a quiet sentence, but it showed a hidden wound. Because friendship is what keeps people together when love fades. And maybe Cindy Crawford loved in the rush of that first great love, but she never got the chance to build a foundation beneath it, stepping in blindly. Richard Gere may have loved, but he may also have done what many famous men do. He never stopped moving, never stopped listening to the voice of a young woman trying so hard to become the woman he wanted. When two people are in love for a long time, they often start to ask each other, where are we going with this? Cindy Crawford didn't ask that question out of doubt. She did it out of a normal desire, the full-hearted desire of a young woman in love with the man she admired. Richard Gere, who was 42 years old, had never been married. He wasn't interested in Cindy because, as he once said, marriage just sounds too ordinary. But Cindy, who was only in her 20s, thought that marriage was the start of real life. So one night in 1991, while Richard was taking a break from filming Mr. Jones, the idea came to him like a flash. Let's go to Vegas tonight. There would be no white dress, no aisle decorations, no wedding invitations, and no happy families. There would just be a few friends, a private jet, a small chapel in Las Vegas, and 2 tinfoil rings. Cindy wore a navy Armani suit instead of a wedding dress because it was the nicest thing she had on hand. She later said, "It wasn't the wedding I dreamed of, but I had Herb Ritz as my maid of honor and photographer too." They laughed, said their vows, and the next morning Hollywood saw Richard Gere and Cindy Crawford as a married couple. It looked like a stylish, spontaneous and cool event from the outside, exactly what you'd expect from 2 stars at the height of their fame. But on the inside it was a compromise. A young woman got married with a tinfoil ring and a borrowed suit, not because she didn't deserve more, but because she loved him enough to take less. Even though Richard Gere asked her to marry him, he couldn't hide his doubts. He might have thought he was doing the right thing, or he might not have wanted to lose her. But maybe, just maybe, he wasn't ready for marriage yet, for being with her, talking and working together to make something. There was no white dress at that wedding, but more than that, no planning for the journey ahead. And if the foundation is laid quickly, what will hold the house together when the storm comes? Richard Gere and Cindy Crawford became the couple that everyone in the entertainment business talked about after their quick wedding in Las Vegas. The couple was on magazine covers and at the biggest movie premieres across America, and at the Oscars and the Met Gala. They were always perfect, always passionate, and always glowing for the cameras. Hollywood once called them the sexiest couple in the world. But behind all the glamour, Cindy Crawford was starting to lose herself. Cindy loved Richard Gere more than just a man, she loved his whole world. So she slowly left her own to enter his. She went to fewer fashion weeks, did fewer photo shoots, and appeared in fewer major ad campaigns. She was no longer Cindy of the catwalk, but Richard Gere's wife, and she was happy to be that. She didn't have to do it, but young love often makes us think that giving up things is the best way to hold on tighter. She learned to meditate. Richard was interested in Tibetan Buddhism, so she looked into it. She tried to enjoy baseball and connect with his friends, directors, producers, and other people from his world, but she never really felt like she fit with them. But she did it all because she thought love meant making sacrifices. Cindy once said, "At 22 I was ready to say, okay, I'll follow." But as the years went by and she got closer to 30, she came to understand something. I didn't want to just follow, I was ready to lead. At times I wished I could walk with him. It wasn't a revolt, it was growth. Sad to say though, one person's growth can throw a relationship off. Back then they were Hollywood's most beautiful pair. One had already made their world, but the other wasn't sure what to call it yet. The time it took Cindy Crawford to really understand who she was had passed, and it was no longer just 17 years. No longer meeting in the middle, it was like 2 people going their own ways in life. At that very moment, everyone still said they were picture perfect on the inside. They weren't in sync yet. Richard Gere and Cindy Crawford made their breakup public on December 1, 1994. A short statement in the way of Hollywood: be polite, act professionally, and don't cry in front of the cameras. But those few words marked the quiet end of a relationship that had been praised as beautiful. In 1995, only 4 years after getting married, they split up. But the real cracks had been there for a long time. The media said it was because of their busy schedules and disagreements that could not be solved. But Cindy saw more to the truth. She said, "We were a lot of things, but I don't know if we were ever friends." That wasn't a sales pitch. It was the kind of remorse that time has boiled down. Because friendship is the only thing that can keep 2 people together when love starts to fade. It is friendship. It means being able to talk to someone on an equal level. But for Cindy and Richard, that was never really there. Cindy was too young to get married. She was only 22 and still trying to figure out who she was. Richard, on the other hand, was already a guy with a clear view of the world, strong beliefs, and a private area that wasn't easily broken into. She went into the relationship with a lot of respect for the other person, but the mismatch made her feel small and helpless, and she slowly faded into the background. It wasn't just a clash of personalities or youth and adulthood, it was also time. It was enough for us to fly from Paris to Los Angeles and spend one night together, Cindy said. It wasn't though. Not only did they live in different places, but they also had different ways of life and mental rhythms. On top of that, mean rumors started to spread. It was all over the press that they said their marriage was fake, a publicity stunt, and even worse, that they were both gay. It was honest Cindy who told Rolling Stone, "I'm amazed when I think of how many women he's been with. When would he have had time to be gay?" People laughed, but it didn't go away so quickly. But more than any scandal, what broke them up wasn't a lack of love, it was a lack of roots strong enough to weather the storms. Love alone wasn't enough. When you realize you can't be yourself in a relationship, you have two options: keep losing yourself or leave to get it back. Cindy chose to leave. Years after the marriage ended, Cindy Crawford never talked about Richard Gere with anger. Instead, she often used the word grateful to describe that time in her life. But what makes people think is how she talked about the relationship, not as a great love but as a way to grow up, in a part she took on too soon. She said on Oprah's Masterclass, "I learned a lot from Richard. How to deal with fans and set limits in the famous world. He was smart, interesting, and had lived a lot of years. It was a beautiful time in my life," she said. But behind her politeness and kindness was something deeper: clarity. No matter how much she loved him, Cindy knew that the relationship was missing something basic: someone to be equal to him. As a child, she said, "I was ready to change into the person someone else wanted me to be. But eventually, I didn't just want to follow." That one sentence might be the most honest way to describe her marriage to Gere. There were no big fights, affairs, or anger. She was just a young woman who entered someone else's life before she fully understood her own, and left when she started to understand it. Richard Gere may not have done anything wrong, but he also didn't do enough to pull Cindy back when she realized she was living like a shadow. She didn't blame him, she said softly. "He was Richard Gere, and I was still trying to figure out who Cindy Crawford really was at that time." The quiet ending of this love story is what sets it apart from most Hollywood marriages. It makes you wonder how many other people have loved in this way, without ever really getting to know each other or answering their questions. And in the end, it wasn't Richard Gere who was left with the unanswered questions. Cindy Crawford, who was 22 at the time, thought that love meant changing who you are. It wasn't until she broke up with her boyfriend that she realized true love doesn't ask you to change, it lets you be who you are. After they got divorced in 1995, Richard Gere and Cindy Crawford didn't stop talking to each other or get into any public fights. After that, they went their separate ways, never crossing paths again and never looking back. They would sometimes talk about each other as an unfinished memory, but they didn't feel bad about it. Cindy remarried businessman Randa Gerber in 1998. Their relationship wasn't a fairy tale romance or media circus, but it was strong enough to last for over 20 years. Before they became partners, she told Randa, "The reason Randa and I really work is because we were friends first. That made all the difference." With Gerber, she didn't have to pretend to like anything or copy his hobbies like she did with Gere. She was just Cindy, real, grown up, and in charge. They have 2 children together, Presley and Ka Gerber. Ka Gerber is now one of the most famous models of her age, and is often called a son. She looks a lot like her mother when she was young. Richard Gere split up with Cindy and married actor Carey Lell in 2002. They had a son named Homer Gere, but the marriage ended in 2016 after years of quiet conflict. Not long after that, he married Spanish feminist Alejandra Silva again, who was almost 30 years younger than him. They live a quiet life away from the press and have 2 children. Recently, they had 2 young children. Cindy chose a balanced life, continuing her job in modeling, business, and charity work while building a strong family with a partner who listens. Richard, on the other hand, leaned toward a quiet, almost reclusive existence. He stays out of the public eye more, picks his roles more carefully, and dedicates himself to Buddhism, helping others, and protecting the environment. They both found peace, but in very different ways. Cindy did it by making choices, choosing to leave when she had to rebuild, and to find love based on friendship. Richard did it by taking time to think, getting away from the noise, and living a more introspective, almost meditative life in the midst of his fame. And the irony is that they didn't really find who they were meant to be until they broke up. Some love stories are meant to be famous but not to last. They used to be the epitome of beauty, fame, and allure, but a beautiful exterior doesn't mean you have a strong foundation. And no amount of attention can warm a relationship that doesn't have roots. Richard Gere and Cindy Crawford loved each other, but that love came too early for one and too late for the other. One was still figuring out who she was, and the other had been through enough bad things to know he didn't want to change. They met because they liked each other and were attracted to each other, but they couldn't stay together when what they needed was someone to talk to and understand them. Cindy Crawford didn't fall into tragedy after her divorce. She actually walked out of that marriage like she was shedding a shell, starting to change, find her own voice, and build a life that she didn't have to follow. Richard Gere, in his usual quiet way, continued his journey, deep, quiet, and at peace in his own way. There was no big romantic event, scandal, or betrayal in their story. But it was the quietness, the gentle, never-ending misalignment, that left a deeper mark than any romantic disaster. So don't mistake love for agreement. Don't give up who you are to be with someone else. And most importantly, learn how to be a friend to yourself before you love someone deeply. Richard Gere and Cindy Crawford were once a beautiful Hollywood dream, but dreams don't always come true. Some shine at just the right time and are remembered for a whole generation. What do you think about their love story? What does it remind you of in your own life? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to click like and subscribe if you want to see more emotional real-life stories. Thanks for watching, and see you next time video.